You're just a secretary, not legal counsel." Those words hit me harder than a slap echoing through the conference room. I sat there, stunned, as CEO Bradley Morrison's laughter filled the air around our mahogany table. The other executives chimed in, their chuckles forming a condescending symphony that made my cheeks flush with embarrassment. I'm Natalie Green, 34 years old. For the past 6 years, I've served as the senior executive assistant at Gravora Group, one of Manhattan's top investment firms. To everyone around me, I was merely the woman who scheduled meetings, managed calendars, and delivered coffee during late-night strategy sessions. What they didn't realize was that beneath my professional facade lay a Harvard law degree earned before life took a different turn. "Mr. Morrison," I began, striving to maintain my composure despite the slight tremor in my hands. "There's a loophole in Section 12 of the acquisition contract. The phrasing regarding intellectual property rights is vague enough." Bradley waved his hand dismissively, his sultan pepper hair glinting in the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Natalie, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but let the legal experts handle the analysis." The irony wasn't lost on me. I had attended law school and graduated magna cum laude. However, when my father fell ill during my final year, I paused my career dreams to care for him. By the time he passed away 2 years later, the legal landscape had shifted, and the firm that had promised me a position withdrew their offer. In desperate need of income, I accepted what I thought would be a temporary role as an executive assistant. 6 years later, I was still here, still invisible. The Blackstone Tech acquisition is worth $90 million, Bradley continued, adjusting his expensive tie. "We've had 3 different law firms review this contract. Some of the brightest legal minds in the city have approved it. Do you really think you found something they overlooked?" I opened my mouth to reply, but he was already turning away, dismissing me as if I were merely an interruption. The other executives resumed their conversation about the deal timeline, their voices fading into the background as something cold and calculating settled in my chest. That night, I stayed late in the office, long after the cleaning crew had finished. The city lights twinkled beyond the windows as I meticulously reviewed every page of the Blackstone Tech acquisition contract. My law degree might have been gathering dust, but my mind was sharper than ever. There it was, hidden in subsection 12.3, a poorly phrased clause that could alter everything. I had always been the type to notice details that others overlooked. Growing up in Buffalo, New York, as the daughter of a blue-collar mechanic, I learned early that survival depended on paying attention to the little things. My father had worked double shifts to fund my education, believing I could achieve anything I aimed for. "Education is the one thing no one can take from you, Natalie," he used to say while helping me with my homework at our kitchen table. "Use that brain of yours." When I received my acceptance letter to Harvard Law, the pride in his eyes made every sacrifice worth it. But life can derail even the strongest plans. Dad's cancer diagnosis came during my 3rd year, just as I was preparing for the bar exam. Treatments were costly, and despite his protests, I knew I had to be there for him. The shift from promising law student to executive assistant was tough. The first few months at Gravora Group were particularly trying as I struggled to hide my frustration over being treated like hired help by people I could have easily outsmarted, but I learned to observe, to listen, and to make myself invaluable in ways that extended beyond my job description. Bradley Morrison was the worst of them. At 52, he exuded the arrogance of someone who had always been privileged, born into wealth, educated at elite schools. He had never experienced dismissal or neglect. His corner office was adorned with awards and photos of him shaking hands with politicians and celebrities, a shrine to his self-importance. I'd watched him for years, noting how he interacted with different people. With clients, he was charming and sophisticated. With peers, he was strategic and calculating, but with those he deemed beneath him, like the cleaning staff, junior employees, and yes, his executive assistant, he displayed a cruel indifference. The Blackstone tech deal was touted as his crowning achievement. The technology company had developed a groundbreaking software platform that could revolutionize data processing in financial institutions. Acquiring them would position Gravora Group as a leader in fintech innovation, potentially enhancing the firm's value by hundreds of millions. For weeks, I'd observed Bradley strutting around the office like a peacock, boasting about orchestrating the entire deal. He had even started drafting his victory speech for the board meeting, confident this acquisition would solidify his position as CEO for years. But now, sitting in the dim office with the contract spread before me, I could see what the expensive lawyers had overlooked. The intellectual property clause contained a crucial ambiguity, one that could be leveraged by someone who knew what to look for. A slow smile crept onto my face as the pieces of my plan began falling into place. The next morning arrived with that crisp October chill that reminded me why I loved New York in the fall. I entered Gravora Group's sleek lobby at precisely 8 a.m., my usual arrival time, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the composed expression I had perfected over the years. To anyone watching, I was simply Natalie Green, the dependable assistant starting another ordinary day. But everything had changed. I spent the morning following my regular routine, checking Bradley's calendar, sorting his mail, and preparing briefing documents for his afternoon meetings. When he arrived at 9:30, barely acknowledging my greeting as he swept past my desk into his office, I felt an unusual calm wash over me. "Natalie," he called through his open door an hour later, "I need you to coordinate with legal, ensure all. The final paperwork for Blackstone is ready for signatures by Friday." "Of course, Mr. Morrison," I replied, standing and walking to his doorway, my hands clasped behind my back. "About yesterday's discussion regarding Section 12, his head snapped up from his computer screen, irritation flaring in his expression. "I thought I made myself clear. That's not your concern." "I understand. I just wanted to." "Natalie," he interrupted, his voice carrying a warning that made several other executives glance our way, "you're great at what you do. Stick to scheduling meetings and leave the legal work to the professionals." I nodded, maintaining a neutral expression, even as something icy formed in my chest. "You're absolutely right. I apologize for overstepping." He waved dismissively and returned to his screen. "Make sure it doesn't happen again." I walked back to my desk, my steps measured, sitting down and opening my computer as if nothing had transpired. But beneath my calm exterior, my mind raced. Bradley had just made a significant mistake. He assumed his dismissal would end the matter. During my lunch break, I took a stroll to the New York Public Library's main branch, claiming I needed to research background information for an upcoming client presentation. In reality, I spent 2 hours in the legal research section, cross-referencing case law and precedents related to intellectual property acquisitions. By 3 p.m., I returned to my desk, reviewing the documents I had printed with the material of someone who once aimed for a career in finding legal loopholes. The research validated my suspicions. The ambiguous language in Section 12.3 created an opportunity that could be exploited under New York State corporate law. The beauty of it was that Bradley himself had handed me the key. His condescending dismissal of my concerns had been witnessed by multiple executives, creating a paper trail that would support my actions if anyone questioned me later. As I watched him through his glass office walls, animatedly gesturing during a phone call likely about the Blackstone deal, I couldn't help but think he had no idea what was coming. Sometimes the most dangerous enemies are those hiding in plain sight. The following day presented an unexpected test of my resolve. I arrived at the office to find Bradley in an unusually upbeat mood, humming as he reviewed what I assumed were the final Blackstone documents. His confidence was contagious if only I hadn't known what I was planning. "Natalie," he called out cheerfully, "cancel my 2 p.m. with Harrison. I want to take the Blackstone executives to lunch at Leonard's. Make the reservation for... Certainly," I replied, already reaching for the phone. "Should I prepare any specific talking points for lunch?" "Not necessary. This is just a celebration lunch. The hard work is done." He leaned back in his chair, embodying the conquering hero. "By Monday, this deal will be signed, sealed, and delivered. $90 million. And that's just the beginning." I made the reservation with the same efficiency I had demonstrated for 6 years, but something about his casual arrogance made my stomach churn. This wasn't just about business success for Bradley. It was about proving his superiority over everyone, including me. The lunch went precisely as he envisioned when he returned at 4 p.m. His tie loosened and his cheeks flushed from what I assumed was expensive wine. He radiated satisfaction. "They're eaten out of my hands," he proclaimed. To the office. "Harrison thinks I'm some kind of genius for structuring the deal this way." From my desk, I watched as he regaled the other executives with stories from lunch, casting himself as the mastermind who had single-handedly orchestrated the entire acquisition. The truth was, I had conducted most of the preliminary research and document preparation, but, of course, none of that mattered in his retelling. That evening, I stayed late again, but this time, I wasn't alone. Thomas Rivera, one of the junior associates, was burning the midnight oil on another case. Thomas had always treated me kindly, seeing me as a colleague rather than hired help. During one of our brief chats by the coffee machine, I learned he had grown up in similar circumstances. "Long day?" he asked, pausing by my desk around 9 p.m. "Just trying to stay on top of things," I replied, closing the file I'd been reading. "You know how it is." "Actually, I wanted to ask you something," Thomas said, lowering his voice and glancing around the empty office. "Yesterday, When Morrison shut you down about that contract issue, what were you trying to tell him? I assessed his face carefully. Thomas had witnessed the humiliating exchange, and I could see genuine curiosity in his eyes, not the condescending amusement I was used to. Why, do you ask? Because I've been reviewing the Blackstone contract for due diligence, and there's something in Section 12 that's been bothering me. The intellectual property language seems. He hesitated, searching for the right word, problematic. My heart raced, but I maintained a neutral expression. What kind of problems? The kind that could potentially invalidate certain aspects of the acquisition if someone wanted to challenge it? Thomas sat down beside my desk. Look, I know Morrison thinks you don't have the expertise to spot legal issues, but I've heard you ask incredibly insightful questions during strategy meetings. You see things others miss. This was risky territory. If Thomas was fishing for information, I needed to tread carefully. But if he genuinely cared about the contract, it might mean my suspicions about the loophole were valid. I appreciate your confidence in me, I replied cautiously, but Mr. Morrison made it clear that legal analysis isn't my responsibility. Morrison's an arrogant fool, Thomas said bluntly, then immediately looked around to ensure no one overheard. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Your secret's safe with me, I assured him, and I meant it. Friday morning arrived with the kind of energy that precedes a major milestone. The Blackstone signing was set for Monday, and the entire office buzzed with anticipation. Bradley had been in the conference room since 8 a.m., going over final details with the legal team and rehearsing his presentation for the board meeting that would follow the signing. I went through my morning routine with extra care, knowing today would likely be my last chance to act on the plan that had been forming in my mind all week. The research I'd conducted at the library had confirmed my suspicions about the loophole, and I had spent the previous evening reviewing New York State corporate filing procedures. At 10 a.m. Bradley emerged from his office with a stack of documents and that familiar, self-satisfied look. Natalie, I need you to messenger these to our legal team at Harrison Blackwell and Associates. Make sure they know this is priority one. He dropped the papers on my desk without looking at me. Also, call my wife and tell her we'll need champagne for the celebration dinner on Monday. The good stuff, not the cheap stuff she bought for the Peterson deal. Of course, I replied, already reaching for the phone. Will there be anything else? Actually, yes. He paused at my desk, a thoughtful look crossing his face. I want you to prepare a press release announcing the acquisition, something that highlights my role in bringing this deal together. The board will want to see some public acknowledgement of our success. The irony was almost too much to bear. He wanted me to write a press release celebrating his triumph when I was planning to destroy that very triumph within the next few hours. I'll have a draft ready by this afternoon, I promised. Excellent. He adjusted his tie and headed toward the elevators. I'll be at lunch with Harrison until 3 p.m. Hold my calls. The moment the elevator doors closed behind him, I felt a surge of adrenaline reminiscent of my law school moot court competitions. This was it, my window of opportunity. I walked calmly to the file room and retrieved a copy of the complete Blackstone acquisition contract along with supporting documentation detailing the intellectual property transfers. Then I returned to my desk and opened my laptop, navigating to the New York State corporate filing website. The loophole I discovered was elegantly simple. Section 12.3 contained language about subsidiary rights and associated intellectual properties that was vague enough to be interpreted in various ways. More importantly, it included a provision allowing third-party acquisition of specific subsidiary rights through direct filing with the state corporate registry. What this meant practically was that someone could potentially file a claim for specific intellectual property rights linked to Blackstone's subsidiary patents rights that weren't explicitly protected under the main acquisition agreement. If successful, such a filing could create a legal obstacle that might delay or even derail the entire deal. The filing fee was $1. I spent the next hour meticulously preparing the necessary paperwork, using my legal training to ensure every detail was correct. The subsidiary rights I targeted were related to Blackstone's data processing algorithms, not the core technology Gravora Group wanted, but significant enough that their absence would considerably diminish the acquisition's value. As I prepared to submit the filing, my hands trembled slightly. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about proving I was more than just a secretary, more than the invisible woman who brought coffee and scheduled meetings. At exactly 2 p.m., I clicked the submit button and paid the $1 filing fee with my personal credit card. The deed was done. The weekend dragged on painfully. I spent Saturday and Sunday in my small apartment in Queens, trying to distract myself with books and Netflix. But my mind repeatedly returned to the filing I submitted. Part of me worried I'd made a grave mistake, while another part felt a fierce satisfaction at finally taking action. By Sunday evening, I convinced myself that nothing would come of it. Perhaps the loophole wasn't as significant as I thought. Maybe the legal teams would swiftly resolve any issues that arose. Perhaps Bradley would still get his victory, and I would remain precisely where I had always been overlooked and invisible. Monday morning changed everything. I arrived at the office at my usual 8 a.m. to find the lobby in chaos. Bradley was near the reception desk, his face red with fury as he shouted into his phone. Several executives clustered nearby, their expressions ranging from confusion to panic. "What do you mean there's a filing dispute?" Bradley was saying. "The signing is in 3 hours. Fix this now." I walked past the group with my usual composure, noting how none of them acknowledged my presence. In my purse, I carried a printout of the filing confirmation I had received from the state registry along with copies of all the supporting documents, just in case. At my desk, I went through the motions of checking Bradley's calendar and sorting his mail, but my attention was on the increasingly frantic phone calls from his office. Through his glass walls, I could see him pacing like a trapped animal, alternating between yelling at someone on the phone and frantically typing on his computer. Around 9:30 a.m., Harrison Peters, the lead attorney from the legal firm handling the acquisition, arrived looking like he hadn't slept in days. Usually pristine suit was wrinkled and his hair was disheveled. "Where's Morrison?" he demanded, barely glancing at me. "In his office," I replied helpfully. "Should I let him know you're here?" He knows. Harrison rushed past my desk and into Bradley's office, closing the door behind him. What followed was 45 minutes of intense discussion that I could hear even through the closed door. Words like intellectual property dispute and third-party filing drifted out, accompanied by increasingly colorful language from Bradley that would make a sailor blush. Finally, the door opened and Harrison emerged, looking defeated. Natalie? Bradley called from his doorway, canceled the signing ceremony. Tell everyone the deal has been postponed pending resolution of a legal matter. I looked up from my computer, hoping to convey an appropriately concerned expression. Is everything all right, Mr. Morrison? Everything is fine, he snapped, though his white-knuckled grip on the doorframe suggested otherwise. Just a minor technical issue we'll resolve quickly. Harrison cleared his throat. Actually, Bradley, it's a bit more complicated than that. Someone has filed a claim for subsidiary intellectual property rights related to Blackstone's data processing patents. Until we can resolve this dispute, we can't move forward with the acquisition. How is that possible? Bradley's voice rose again. We had 3 different law firms review this contract. The filing appears to exploit an ambiguity in Section 12.3, Harrison explained. It's actually quite clever. Whoever did this clearly understood the specific language and knew how to use it. I felt a thrill of vindication wash over me, but I kept my expression neutral. This was precisely what I had hoped for, but I needed to play my role perfectly. Who filed the claim? Bradley demanded. Harrison consulted his notes. Someone named Natalie Green. The silence that followed was deafening. All heads turned toward me in the conference room. I could feel their stares like a physical weight, but I remained seated at my desk, my hands folded calmly in my lap. Bradley's face shifted from red to white, finally turning an alarming shade of purple as